At 7:46 a.m., local time on October 22nd, 2025, in the South China Sea, the horizon glowed with a pale golden light. It was the kind of morning that could fool anyone into thinking the ocean was peaceful, open, and harmless. From a distance, the water looked endless and calm, almost gentle, but aboard the USS Higgins, DDG-76, that illusion was about to vanish. On the bridge, the watch crew moved through the familiar rhythm of an ordinary morning at sea. Coffee cups rested near consoles, quiet conversation drifted between stations, and the steady hum of electronics filled the background. Everything felt normal, controlled, routine. Then the radar operator suddenly went still. A new contact had appeared, bearing 275, and it was closing fast. The captain stepped behind the scope as a green pulse flashed across the display. Then another followed. The contact's course was unmistakable. It was moving directly across the destroyer's projected path. No AIS signal, no identification, no explanation. In only a few seconds, the easy rhythm on the bridge was gone, replaced by sharp focus and rising tension. Then a voice broke through the radio static, hard and accented. "U.S. warship, you are in Chinese waters. Leave immediately." The bridge fell silent. Outside, the South China Sea remained smooth and glass-like, almost unreal in its stillness. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay Scarborough Shoal, a ring of half-submerged coral claimed by Beijing, claimed by Manila, and contested by the sea itself. Washington saw these as international waters. Beijing saw them as sovereign territory. And in that moment, those two views were no longer abstract policy arguments. They were two warships on a collision course of political will. "Log the transmission," the captain ordered. "Respond on open channel. Standard phrasing." The communications officer keyed the microphone, his voice calm, sharp, and disciplined. "Unidentified vessel, this is United States warship conducting lawful transit through international waters. No interference required." There was no answer. Instead, the radar screen changed again. Two more signatures appeared, larger and faster, moving together in tight formation. From the starboard bridge wing, binoculars confirmed what the radar had already revealed. Two Chinese Type 052D destroyers were cutting through the calm sea, their bow waves carving bright white lines across the water. They were closing at 27 knots. On deck, sailors paused in the middle of their tasks. Even without words, everyone could feel the shift. The air itself seemed heavier, thick with salt, heat, and tension. Inside the Combat Information Center, status boards lit up as data streamed in. Bearings, transmissions, movements, speed changes, everything was being recorded automatically. That was the rule in these encounters: warn, document, de-escalate. The captain asked for the CPA. "Closest point of approach, 1.2 nautical miles and shrinking," the navigator replied. That was close enough to matter. The Higgins held steady, maintaining course and speed in accordance with freedom of navigation procedures, neither aggressive nor yielding. Her SPY-1D radar continued sweeping the sea, building a digital picture of everything within hundreds of miles. The crew knew exactly what ship they were on. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 155 meters of steel, systems, and precision, carrying more combat power than the entire fleets of many countries. But none of that mattered in the way people might imagine. This was not a morning about force. It was a morning about control. Soon, the first Chinese destroyer slipped into view, its gray hull reflecting flashes of morning light off the waves. Through binoculars, sailors on its deck could be seen standing along the rails, cameras raised and pointed directly at the Higgins. Its wake boiled beside the American ship in deliberate parallel motion, a message without subtlety. "Bridge to combat. Maintain MCON 3. Record all emissions." Electronic warfare confirmed faint radar pings from the Chinese ship. Surface search mode only, not fire control radar. Not yet. It was a warning signal, a reminder, a pressure tactic. Then the radio came alive again. "U.S. vessel, you are intruding into Chinese waters. Alter course immediately or you will bear responsibility for all consequences." Still, the Higgins did not move off her track. The captain leaned over the chart table and checked the position again. 25 miles from the shoal, still outside any recognized territorial limit. "Keep course, no deviations." Now the tension was written on every face. Sailors glanced between radar scopes and the sea outside the bridge windows. Even the sound of the ventilation system seemed louder than before. Every ordinary movement became sharper in the mind. The slight turn of a wheel, the scratch of a pen, the soft hiss of the intercom. It was one of those moments where time seemed to stretch, and every second carried more weight than it should. CIC, set recording time. Mark 0753, flag all transmissions for intelligence review. A petty officer acknowledged and typed. The two Chinese destroyers had now matched speed exactly. They were close enough for the crew to see sunlight flashing off their hull numbers. No weapons were visibly manned, but the intent was obvious. This was pressure by presence, coercion through distance, and a test of patience as much as seamanship. Inside the Higgins, discipline held perfectly. No raised voices, no dramatic gestures, no sudden decisions. The crew had trained for this again and again. Every radar sweep, every logged transmission, every unanswered hail became part of a larger record, evidence of professionalism under deliberate pressure. At 7:58 a.m., the captain stepped closer to the bridge window, watching the two Chinese warships gliding beside his destroyer like shadows on the water. "Keep recording," he said quietly. "Let them make the next move." The radar kept pulsing. The sea remained calm. But everyone aboard understood exactly what was happening. This was a contest of will, fought not with missiles or gunfire, but with timing, composure, and restraint. And somewhere beyond the reef line of Scarborough Shoal, another chapter in one of the world's most dangerous maritime rivalries was already unfolding. By 8:09 a.m., the picture had grown even tighter. The sea still mirrored the sky, blue and deceptively beautiful, but the tactical display told the real story. The two Chinese destroyers had shifted into a flanking formation. One moved off the Higgins' starboard quarter, the other eased forward of her beam. Slowly and deliberately, they began boxing her in through what naval professionals would call a shadow escort. Inside Combat Information Center, focus hardened. Displays glowed in shades of green and amber. Dozens of contacts moved across the screen at once, each one tracked, logged, and cross-checked. Voices stayed controlled, almost quiet, but every report carried urgency. "Contact Red 1, now holding at 600 yards, came the call from Surface Watch. "Red 2 closing, 300 yards and narrowing." "Copy," the tactical action officer answered. "Maintain course, log all movements." The captain stood in the center of the bridge with his arms folded, eyes fixed on the digital sea picture. "No deviation," he said. "We stay predictable." Outside, the Chinese destroyer Huainan loomed so close that crew members could make out deck markings and hull numbers with the naked eye. Its Type 730 close-in weapon system turrets rotated idly, not threatening enough to trigger a crisis, but visible enough to be unmistakable. Another transmission came through the radio, clipped and stern. "U.S. warship, you are violating Chinese sovereignty. Turn away immediately." The Higgins answered once more with measured calm. "This is United States warship conducting lawful transit through international waters under international law. We intend no harm and will maintain our course." Then came silence again. Between the ships, the water turned white under propeller wash. Each vessel made tiny adjustments to preserve separation without colliding. On the radar screen, the closest point of approach dropped below 500 yards. For destroyers moving at speed, that was razor-thin spacing. Observation posts were manned. Cameras rolled continuously. The Higgins electronic warfare suite detected intermittent radar sweeps, low power and probing, enough to raise concern, but not enough to justify a response. Every pulse pushed the tension higher. The executive officer leaned closer to the captain. "They're painting us, sir. Short bursts." "Record it," the captain replied. No reaction. To an outside observer, the Higgins might have seemed to be sailing smoothly, almost motionless in posture. In truth, the ship was performing a highly controlled ballet of tiny corrections, 1 or 2 degrees on the rudder, fractional throttle changes, careful movements designed to preserve stability without looking evasive. Her Aegis system held constant awareness on every nearby contact, ready to shift from monitoring to defense in an instant if the situation changed. Above them, the Seahawk helicopter remained fueled and ready on deck, its rotors tied down. Its crew sat in readiness, waiting. If the atmosphere shifted in the wrong direction, they could launch in under 3 minutes. Then, at 8:21 a.m., the situation tightened again. The Chinese ship astern surged forward, moving closer than before, less than 300 yards away. Spray from its bow washed across the Higgins hull. "Bridge CIC, contact Red 2, crossing CPA. 280 yards and closing." The captain gave the next order in a voice so calm it almost seemed unreal. "Helm, 5 degrees port. Maintain speed." The destroyer answered with a slight lean, cutting a smooth arc through the water, widening the gap by just enough. From a distance, the maneuver would have looked effortless. It was anything but. A mistake here would not simply have been embarrassing. It could have sent billions of dollars of steel crashing together in one of the world's most politically volatile waterways. Across the water, sailors on the Chinese deck filmed everything. A red flag snapped above them in the wind. The purpose was obvious. The footage could be framed for domestic audiences as proof that the American ship had yielded. But cameras do not always capture reality. The Higgins had not abandoned her course, only the angle of motion made it appear that way. Inside CIC, the electronic warfare operator called out again. Encrypted chatter had been detected between the two Chinese ships. Short bursts, not yet translated. "Keep recording," the TAO said. "We'll sort it later." The minutes dragged. The tension was not dramatic in a theatrical sense. It was precise, technical, and unforgiving. Every sailor on board knew the rules of engagement completely. Weapons remained tight. Any reaction had to be tied to unmistakable hostile intent. One misread signal, one emotional response, one mistake in judgment, and a regional crisis could begin in seconds. Then the most dangerous moment came. The Chinese lead ship veered slightly to starboard and cut even closer, only a few hundred feet away before leveling off. Its engines rolled through the water like distant thunder. For several breathless seconds, the bridge windows of both ships reflected each other's crews. Two nations, eye to eye, divided by glass, sea spray, and decades of mistrust. "CIC, mark that time," the captain said softly. 8:29. That's as close as they'll get. He was right. Soon after, the Chinese ships began easing back on their throttles. Their wakes widened and drifted behind them. The immediate pressure began to loosen. The message, however, had already been delivered. Neither side had stepped beyond its script. No collision, no direct confrontation, no exchange beyond the practiced language of sovereignty and lawful transit. Yet everyone knew how narrow that margin had become. By 9:42 a.m., the sea looked calm once more. The radar picture had finally opened up as the two Chinese contacts faded westward toward the horizon. They had broken away and reduced speed. Only then did the crew of the Higgins begin to breathe a little easier. But nobody truly relaxed. In waters like these, even disengagement could be tactical. Contacts now opening range. Closest point recorded at 270 yards, Combat Information Center reported. "Copy. Secure from general quarters," the captain answered, his voice steady, dry, and controlled. Beyond the haze, Scarborough Shoal remained invisible, little more than coral and rock beneath shallow blue water. Yet on the geopolitical map, it carried enormous weight. For Beijing, it was Huangyandao, Chinese territory by historic claim. For Manila, it lay within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, reinforced by the 2016 Hague Tribunal ruling. For Washington, it was part of an international maritime space that had to remain open. One reef, three positions, endless room for friction. By mid-morning, the Higgins resumed her transit, holding a steady course north by east at 15 knots. Logs were sealed. Data was exported. Every second of radar and radio recording was encrypted for later review by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Officially, the encounter would likely be categorized as routine shadowing with no formal incident. Technically, that would be correct. But everyone aboard knew that routine no longer meant safe. Later, Beijing's Southern Theater Command released its statement through state media, declaring that Chinese naval units had monitored, warned, and expelled a United States destroyer that had illegally entered territorial waters near Huangyandao. The wording mattered. Expelled was crafted for political effect, projecting strength, control, and domestic reassurance. Washington answered with language just as careful. The Pentagon stated that USS Higgins had conducted a routine freedom of navigation operation in accordance with international law, and that no unsafe or unprofessional interactions had occurred. Every word there mattered too. Routine, lawful, professional. It was the vocabulary of containment, designed to prevent a dangerous encounter from becoming something larger. In the media, the event would become a headline and then a symbol. For the sailors who lived through it, it became another entry in the ship's record, another day where calm decisions mattered more than firepower. But the deeper significance was impossible to miss. This marked the first time in 6 years that a U.S. destroyer had sailed directly within 12 nautical miles of Scarborough Shoal. That timing was not accidental. Only a few months earlier, the Philippines had expanded its Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, opening 4 additional bases across Luzon. China's response came quickly. More patrols, more law enforcement activity, and more gray-hulled warships asserting presence. The Higgins encounter fit that pattern perfectly. This was not open conflict, it was controlled signaling. Every movement meant something, every transmission meant something, even every silence meant something. For Beijing, the goal was to show control. For Washington, the goal was to demonstrate continued access. For Manila, watching carefully from the side, it was a reminder that American ships still sailed where they said they would. Back aboard the Higgins, the crew gathered for debriefing. The mood was disciplined, not celebratory. No one treated the morning like a victory lap. They knew this pattern well. Document, analyze, prepare for the next encounter. The electronic warfare officer reviewed each radar emission from the Chinese ships. The intelligence team marked useful data for future operations. The ship's log recorded no injuries, no damage, and no meaningful course deviation. Just another case of professionalism under pressure. And yet the larger questions remained in the air long after the ships had separated. How close can two rival navies operate before one small error changes everything? How many routine encounters can happen before routine stops being routine? Outside, the sea glittered with total indifference. The Higgins pushed ahead through the swell, white spray rising from her bow, engines humming with the low, steady confidence of a ship back on course. For the moment, the peace held. But beneath that calm surface, the contest continued. Satellites watched from orbit. Aircraft tracked patrol patterns. Sensors mapped signatures. Each side studied the other with relentless attention. The South China Sea had become a vast chessboard of steel hulls and shifting lines, where rules were argued, tested, and rewritten almost daily. In that game, success was not always about who struck first. More often, it was about who kept moving forward without blinking. As the destroyer's wake stretched behind her in a narrow, perfect line across the blue water, the real question remained unsettled. Do encounters like this make a larger clash more likely? Or are they the uneasy cost of keeping some of the world's most contested waters open? That answer may shape the future of the region far more than any single statement ever could.